So then I watched another 2018 film directed by a woman. This is Mary, Queen of Scots. This story has been told many, many times. This, in this case, it was from a screenplay by Beau Williamson, who based his work on the work of John Guy, who did one of the more recent biographies of Mary, Queen of Scots. What's great about this particular adaptation and this source material is this research being so recent included a lot of more modern takes on sexuality and other things that are expressed really well in this film. This was directed by Josie Rourke in her directorial debut. She's a theater director, and she brought several of her theater actors on board with her in this film. Uh, Saoirse Ronan plays Mary, Queen of Scots. Margot Robbie plays Queen Elizabeth. Jack Lowden plays Mary's second husband. I'm gonna get a little spoilery. Historically, he definitely liked men, may have been bisexual. They do it really well in this film. Um, at first, you're charmed by him, and he does cunnilingus, and you're like, heck yeah. And then there's a moment, well, actually, before the cunnilingus, there's a moment with one of the other guys where I was like, hmm. And then it happened exactly as I was expecting. And my friend I watched it with was like, I didn't see that coming. And I was like, I totally did. But you have to know it's coming. So I'm spoiling. I'm definitely going to put spoilers in this thing. So if you've seen this, I already spoiled for you. Sorry. Um, I really liked that. And then I found an article that was an interview with John Guy, who did the research, basically talking about how, like, here is the facts, here is why this is, for the most part, accurate. And what I loved about this film in particular was, well, there were like three things that I loved the most. One, obviously, the gay content. I was like, yes, because there have always been men who slept with men and women who slept with women, and there's always been men who sleep with men and women who sleep with men and women, and all of it. And there's just the way we talk about these relationships have changed, and in the most part, became the way they became in sort of Anglo-centric countries with the rise of the Victorian era. That's Victorians really fucked everybody over in terms of sexuality and criminalization and all of that. If you look into that history. A. B. You got a Queen Elizabeth who was the strong queen we all know and love, but also allowed to be vulnerable in ways that I don't know that we all have seen in a lot of portraits of Elizabeth. She's allowed to feel both grief for her inability to have children, not necessarily because she can't have children, but because in order to have children, she'd have to give up power by marrying, and the way that it sort of balances her knowledge, her self knowledge of the strength that she has as a leader with what she would have to give up in order to have children, which would also give her an heir. Um, and all of that, that balance is done in a way that brings in particularly female emotions in a way that I don't know I'd seen before. I'm not always a fan of films that like what's the word I'm looking for? Reduce women to their biological urges, but I'm also not going to say that those urges don't exist, right? And I think that in particular, this film and the way that it um, looks at both these queens and the way in which the power structure worked at the time they were alive and in the countries that they ruled, the way that they balance their intellectual strengths with their biological urges, with the way in which biology played into um, balance and passing down of power is really well done. And allows for a complexity and a vulnerability that you don't often get to see from these women because they're emotional and sexual without ever feeling stereotyped. They never feel swoony. when she's being seduced by the man that she ends up marrying, Mary. It is her. She's swept up out of because he's charming as fuck, right? And then almost immediately knows that she's fucked up, and the way they play that, because Saoirse is such a great actress, the way they play her being sucked into sexual pleasure and then suddenly realizing, oh, I fucked up, is just really great. And her, both of them sort of fighting with these men who just do not respect them because they are women, even though the women know they are smarter than these men, but the men still feel, you know, that these women, they're, kowtowing to women because of biology that they feel are inferior to them, when we all know they're not inferior just because they're women, slash, just because these women are brilliant fucking women who, I think that dialectic is really well balanced in this film. I liked that it didn't pit them against each other until the very end when they do meet each other, and it's not even that stereotyped like catfighty type woman versus woman. It is two women in similar positions, so they're probably the only two women who understand each other, but they have two very different takes on how best to play the situations they're in, and that causes their strife. And it is nothing catty about it. It's just two different takes on what is the best way to rule for each of their countries, um, which sets them at odds with each other. And I really liked how for the longest time they really did try to be allies for each other, because they are the only two who understand the situations they're in. Just thought it was really, really well made. And then, of course, the costumes and set design are impeccable. Um, the score is Max Richter. I love Max Richter so much. I will always go to town for a Max Richter score. Um, just another great film about how the history of the world is men are shit and women trying to make things better. Um, the more we agree that that is the history of the world, the better off I think we'll all be. So I liked this movie a lot. I liked. Oh, I forgot. The other thing is they peppered in, whether it was historically accurate or not. They peppered in actors of color into main roles, and they just did it, and I'm completely okay with that. They do that in theater all the time. They'll set things in the Elizabethan era and have a black actor playing something that's not Othello, and it's totally okay. You just go with it, because there's there's being historically. It's my thoughts. I think that we need to critically look at the real way in which there was always diversity and inclusion in our world, and it was never as white cis-centric as we try to think, history has tried to claim it is. But I also think that in places where it was very white centric, that if it's art, you can play fast and loose with that, and add people who are non-white in, as long as you so I think in this case they did it in a way that it felt right, in and it felt, it didn't feel like if you put them in there were ramifications. Whereas in a film like last year where Lady Macbeth did something similar, but then the actions that happened to the specific character, um, I felt then didn't take in account the fact that she was black, and the actions that would have happened would have had a completely different ramification for a black woman at that time. So the characters in this film that are of color, nothing happens to them in such a way that race would be a factor in the same way that it would have been a factor in Lady Macbeth, and that's why I didn't like it in Lady Macbeth. And you can go back and find that review and see more thoughts on why I felt that way. So I think you should go see Mary Queen of Scots. I think it is well made. I think it is two of the most searing and fierce performances of the year from two of the best working actresses out today. I want more period films by women, because when they do, we get these complex women who are both vulnerable and strong, because strength includes vulnerability, and women understand that, and we're starting to have men understand that, which is also good. So this is Josie Rourke's Mary Queen of Scots. I recommend it.